Over the last couple of years, I've shared a lot of the data regarding the crimes committed by drug companies. For example, Pfizer was convicted of the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice. We're talking about billions. They're convicted of RICO charges, organized fucking crime. And just like, whatever. And it's not to say, again, that they can't do good or create products that can be helpful in our society, but we need to know the system that we're dealing with that's profiting and doing unethical practices that are largely hurting so many people.
Welcome to the Fitness CEO Podcast.
Hey friend, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Fitness CEO Podcast. And my friend, do I have an incredible episode for you today where I sat down with my dear friend who's a health expert. He's also a USA Today best-selling author of Eat Smarter, Sleep Smarter, just came out with his new cookbook, the Eat Smarter Cookbook. He's also the host with millions of YouTube downloads of the Model Health Show, and here today to inspire you to live a healthier life, a fitter life. Without further ado, I want to welcome my dear friend, Mr. Shawn Stevenson, to the show. My man, Shawn Stevenson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Dude, so I am so pumped to have you. Lot to cover, just from your wealth of knowledge from a health, fitness perspective. Your new book is dropping next month, so a lot to cover there. But before we dive in, just to kind of set the tone for the audience, we met when you were speaking at Fitness Business Summit pre-COVID, I think 2018.
Yeah, different time.
Different time. Super inspired for that. Started to follow you, watch the Model Health Show. My wife is a raving fan. And it's been a kind of cool whirlwind now, being reconnected with Bedros, and here we are in the studio. And my first question is really to kind of uncover the backstory. And I give a keynote, Shawn: pain, passion, and purpose, because I really believe the biggest impactors, the biggest people that are mover and shakers, that have impact and live purpose, they've typically gone through trauma and pain. And I think you have an incredible origin story that for our audience who hasn't heard, I would love to dive into. So if you'd be so kind, why don't you start with the backstory?
Absolutely, yeah. It's crazy. I just crossed my 20-year anniversary of working in health and fitness.
Oh, congrats.
And, I did not know that I would be doing this for a living for sure. When I went to school initially, it was under the guise of like, what can I do to be successful, right? And all I had as examples was like television, so like watching the Cosby Show or like movies like Boomerang and Eddie Murphy, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, I'll do that. I'll do business, or I'll become a doctor. And so I went to school with the idea that I'm going to get this particular training and then go out in the world and make a living and the whole thing, And fate had other plans for me. My means of getting to college, being that I'm from the inner city, low-income community, the only people I saw, quote, make it were athletes. And so that was my channel. And when I was 15 years old, I had already ran a 4.5 40, defensive back, returning kicks and punts. I was doing my thing, but it was at track practice that year that I was doing a 200-meter time trial, and I broke my hip just from running. There was no trauma. I didn't fall. Nobody hit me. My bones were that brittle, my bone density.
Just from running.
And fast forward, after that, by the way, I've got game films on the football field where nobody's touching me. I'm breaking away on a 39 sweep or 38 sweep, past the safety, and then I just fall because I tore something or, again, breaking a bone. And it wasn't until years later that I was diagnosed with a degenerative bone and spinal disease. And, it really tore my definition of reality apart, because here I was 20 years old when I got this diagnosis, by the way.
20 years old.
20 years old with an advanced arthritic condition on my spine. And I went in to see the physician, but it wasn't because I knew that I had this problem. It's just like I had a nuisance of a pain in the back of my leg. Come to find out that was sciatic nerve pain because of the compression in my spine.
Oh, yeah.
From my spine deteriorating. And he puts the MRI up for me to see. And he told me that I have this degenerative disc disease, mainly, and my disc in between my vertebrae, my L4, L5S1, and I know a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this. Totally. Because these particular disc issues are rapidly increasing in our society, which is not normal. We're really designed to be able to thrive for many, many decades beyond what we're seeing today. And, if you just consider, a lot of people know about the blue zones. is kind of top of mind, where we have these centenarians, people living 100 and beyond. But it's not just the fact that they're living that long, it's their health span and their mobility. They're still contributing to society, oftentimes working, taking care of kids, participating in celebration. Whereas in our society today, we're oftentimes heavily debilitated by that point, just even getting into our 70s and 80s, if we make it that far. And it's just like our quality of life is being diminished. And so getting this diagnosis at 20,
20 years old.
he puts his hand on my shoulder and he looks me in my eye, and I'm asking him like, okay, so what do we got to do to fix this? I was just kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like ready to go. And as he has his hand on my shoulder, he said, "I'm sorry, son, this is incurable." And my brain is just like, what? Like, what do you mean? He's like, "This is incurable. This is something that just happens. And I'm sorry that it happened to you." And at the time, I was in college and I was a researcher. I had different lab assignments, this kind of thing. And I knew about something called causality. It's like a principle in physics, right? And at the time when he said it, it didn't make sense. But because he knew and I didn't, like this is his expertise, I just kind of outsourced my belief to him. And knowing this now, again, being in this field at this level for this long, I didn't know at the time what I experienced was something called a nocebo effect.
Nocebo?
Nocebo. So you know about the placebo.
Placebo,
right?
Yeah.
And placebos, when we do our gold standard of clinical trials in science, are randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. So basically giving a fake or inert treatment and another group gets the real thing. What most people don't realize is that placebos are about 33% effective on average at creating a therapeutic response.
Really?
Right? So just the belief
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you're taking a drug that's going to reduce your blood pressure or decrease your symptoms of anxiety or even break down your cancer tumor. All right, we've got so many studies on this looking at the impact of placebos.
A third of the time.
That's the average.
Yeah.
But there are certain industries where it's even higher. Like there's about an 80% effect in mental health or kind of antipsychotic medications. All right, so it's specifically talking about things like depression, anxiety. The power of the mind is remarkable. All right. Now that's a placebo. A nocebo effect is when you get a negative injunction, because a placebo is essentially like something you're going to get a positive therapeutic effect. A nocebo effect is like this bad thing is going to happen, right? You take this medication and it's a antagonist, right? So it's something that's going to either reverse a condition or an agonist to make it worse.
And that going in.
But you don't know.
Okay.
This is the thing. And let me give you an example of this. Some really great work was done by Alia Crum and her team at Stanford. And they brought test subjects in and randomized them. And they gave them histamine, like a skin prick, to cause a histamine reaction, right? So they develop a little bit of a rash, okay? And from there, they split them into different groups where now they're going to give them what they believe to be a treatment, but it's a completely inert cream, all right? It has no therapeutic effect whatsoever. One group was told that this cream is an agonist, and the other is told that it's an antagonist. So one group is believing that this cream is going to make their rash go away. The other group believes that it's going to make their rash worse. Now, here's what's crazy. Again, this is a completely inert cream. After just a couple of minutes, within about a 10-minute time span, and how fast it happened depended on how much faith they had in the competence of the physician who told them what it's going to do. People's rash got worse or got better in just a matter of minutes based on their belief. And again, the most important factor was how competent they believed the person telling them about it to be. All right. So that's the power of the mind. Their rash went away just based on their belief, or it got worse based on their belief. So again, there's tons of studies I could go on and on about the nocebo effect.
That's wild, by the way.
For me, it was like I was told that this is incurable, that I was going to be in pain for the rest of my life, right? I'll never be able to walk normally again, because I went from a nuisance of a pain when I went in to about a week and a half later, chronic debilitating pain. Like the pain was so bad, the sciatic nerve pain shooting down my leg. Every time I'd stand up, it's just like, I became in fear because the pain was so bad. Like it would make me kind of wince back, like look like I have like a nervous tick. It was
Yeah, yeah.
embarrassing. And so being that he told me there was nothing I could do and coming from the conditions that I come from, it was like a permission slip for me to give up. Right. And fast forward the story is that it does have a happy ending. Fortunately, because I'm rare. It's a rare experience. It took me 2 years, but after seeing physician after physician, getting a second, third, fourth opinion, thankfully, those seeds that were planted before and realizing like principles of causality, understanding, basic tenets of like what you put into your body can make a change. I had nutritional science class, but it didn't really apply until that moment. Also, principles of movement, for example, that were pulled away because every time I see a new physician, they write me a bed rest prescription, basically, that I could use for my job and keep getting unemployment, right? Because I'm in pain. I'm no use to society. And so 2 years later, and this is when everything changed, and this is a simple principle that you guys talk about, that my guy, Bedros, talks about, that we really connect on. Everything changed when I decided to take responsibility. So I took complete responsibility for my life. I stopped outsourcing my beliefs, my potential, and stopped finger pointing because I was blaming everybody. Like, why won't they help me? Why aren't these people there for me? Why this? Why that? My parents, why do they, all of this stuff every day, all day. Why me? Why me? And that's something called instinctive elaboration. It's like a automation program in the human brain. It's one of our most powerful faculties. We're always asking a question. It's kind of guiding our focus. All right. So it's generally called like your centering question or your habitual question. And so for some people, it's like they're constantly thinking, how can I get people to like me? Or, how can I be, how can I experience love? Or, how can I make it through the day? It's just like we have these questions that are playing all the time. And for me, it was why me record. And, eventually, even doing this work for this amount of time, I was able to flip that question around and even making why me something powerful. Because at the time, why me, my brain was searching for things to affirm why me. Because, you're not trustworthy, or you lack patience, or you're not lovable, or like all of these things will come up. You don't have advantages.
Like thinking through and kind of like putting a story behind why you were in this particular situation.
Exactly. You're going to look for evidence,
Yep.
externally and internally, to affirm why your life sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And it just helps to give legs to that belief structure. Eventually, I was able to reframe the why me, and it was why me because I'm strong enough. Why me because I'm creative enough. Why me because I have a capacity unlike other people in my environment, right? Why me because I can make it. And I use that fuel to put a plan together, because also I'm very, as you know, I'm very logical, and I deconstruct things.
Everything.
And so I mapped out a plan like, okay, if I'm wanting to take some pressure off my spine, I've gained all this weight over these 2 years, I probably want to like take some of this pressure off my spine, lose weight. And so how can I go about that? Like just asking about that question. Also, what are the materials? And this was a game changer. I asked, what is my spine made of? Right? What
Yeah.
what are my bones actually made of? Because I know about the commercials.
Yep.
And the milk mustache.
Yep.
But that wasn't getting me where I wanted to be, because I was guzzling milk every day.
Sure.
And so asking these questions, and that led me to things that were already there the whole time. This is the crazy thing. It's like, it's just what you attuned to, right? Because I had the problem glasses on, I couldn't see all the solutions that were around me the whole time. And when I made this switch in my psyche and decided to get well, put a strategy together, like I'm gonna eat better, I'm gonna move my body, because I relented to stop moving, which now everything's atrophying in my body. And also I'm gonna try to recover better, because every night was my biggest struggle. I couldn't sleep because the pain would wake me up.
Because night is more sensitive. You're sensitive on that, or?
Just move, because if I might move a certain way, and the sciatic pain would shoot down my leg. And so I was taking medication to sleep at night. And here's another thing, I don't talk about this very often, but when that physician gave me my prescription, this is crazy, and everybody really needs to hear this. There were two hot drugs at the time. Okay, this is about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Both of these are non-steroidal anti-inflammatories or NSAIDs. One was Celebrex and the other was Vioxx. All right. Fortunately, my physician wrote me a prescription for Celebrex, which could have easily been Vioxx. Now, Celebrex, I'm saying fortunately, even though I had this side effect called restless leg syndrome, it didn't have its own drug yet, so I didn't know what it was. The doctor didn't know what it was. But basically, I go to bed and it felt like my legs are trying to fucking leave and go on a walk on their own.
Damn.
But so that was another thing contributing to my inability to sleep. And just like, here's another medication to help you sleep, right? Vioxx, on the other hand, which again is just a roll of the dice, I could have been put on Vioxx. And Vioxx, this was a drug brought to the market by Merck. Vioxx factually killed 40,000 Americans at minimum. It was 40,000 to 60,000 Americans and hundreds of thousands of cardiovascular events. And again, I say factually, this isn't hearsay.
Yep.
This isn't a might have.
Yep.
This was like real world litigation, the whole thing. They hid their evidence from the drug trials, pointing to like, oh, this could be a problem. Trying to get this blockbuster drug to the market, billion-dollar drug. And that could have been me because a lot of young people died from heart attacks being on that drug. And I was just trying to do what I could to get well.
Yep.
And so all the while, like there's this parallel thing that is going with me as I'm working to improve my health, right? It's this other story that, you know, eventually I became a champion in and facing off against the culture of sickness that we're currently in. And to put the cherry on the story, on top, you know, after putting these things in place, it's just a matter of weeks before, man, I felt like the pain was gone, first of all, that I've been experiencing for 2 years. It was completely gone. But I was in fear, like I was scared, like every step almost, like it's going to come back. And I had to work on my mind. And I didn't know that getting myself physically healthier was going to impact my thoughts so much and make me be more positive and be aware of the negative thoughts that would come up. Now, a lot of people, if you don't have support, you'll get into a battle with those negative thoughts. And fortunately, I had mentors from afar, essentially, at the time. And Bedros wasn't around yet to be my mentor, you know, but to have these other voices to affirm, like, okay, I have agency here. I'm powerful.
Yeah.
I have the ability to write my own story.
Yep.
And I just kept filling my mind with all these kind of positive messages, but not from a superficial thing, but just like I had real world evidence. Like I was already feeling better. And 9 months later, I got a scan done on my spine. My 2 herniated discs had retracted on their own. My disc had previously looked like black, like they were so thin and looked like some burnt bacon, basically, you know. Ooh. And now the light was shining through them. They had regenerated.
Looking healthier.
Essentially, yeah. Now I had substance, like I had actual disc material there, and I had the spine that was more attributed to somebody of my age group, right? And this was impossible. He told me that this was incurable. This was not supposed to happen. And cut to being at a university at the time, people saw this change, like outwardly. I looked like a different person, you know, but not like somebody who just lost weight. I looked like somebody who was radiantly healthy.
Like you can see the energy in you.
You could see it,
Yeah.
you know, because I see pictures of myself back then, and it's, you know, it's tough to look at them because I look like I'm dying.
Yeah.
You know, I look like a ghost. And so when people started coming up to me, asking me for help, this is where we get into the fitness CEO aspect. You know, a friend of mine, who I went to high school with, his little sister was at the university, and she came up to me. She was like, "Oh my God, like she hadn't seen me in maybe 6 months or whatever." She was like, "What did you do?" And I was just like, you know, I just changed the way I was eating, and you know, I was working out because I'm at the university gym. All the while I live in Ferguson, Missouri, which is like, in some aspects, it's like not a war zone, but it's definitely very volatile. You know, there's a lot of violence, food desert. You know, it's just like is a very very challenging place to live.
Is it close to St. Louis?
Ferguson is, I mean, St. Louis is huge, right? So it's kind of like it's like a town
within
in St. Louis. Yeah,
okay,
basically. You know, so there's so many places: Ferguson, Florissant, Chesterfield. Like there's St. Louis County, but you know, it's so crazy that right outside of Ferguson there's this university, right? The University of Missouri St. Louis, which is where I went.
Yeah.
And so I had that resource because in Ferguson, I didn't see any gyms. I didn't know what a fucking yoga studio. Like I didn't know that existed. You know what I mean? And so to have access is one thing, and this is one of the things that people talk about, like having access to these things, because I wasn't exposed. But regardless of the circumstances that I was in, I could find a way. If I knew that a way was possible, that was the biggest thing. And so a friend of mine who I've been knowing for years, she was in chiropractic school, and I just thought she was super weird, like her and her friends, like whatever. But now she took me to, there was one Whole Foods in all of St. Louis, which is a big city. It is a big
Oh, yeah.
city.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. One Whole Foods in the entire city. I live in LA now, like literally,
corner.
bro. Yes, you could throw a rock any direction to hit a Whole Foods.
Yep.
And there was a Wild Oats, which has since been bought by Whole Foods. And she took me there. And I immediately went over to these books, and there was like journals with all these studies on reversing chronic illnesses referenced. And I'm just like, how did I not know about this? You know? And so anyways, when my friend's sister asked me for help, I was just like, yeah, I could meet you here on Saturday, da da da. And then she was like, how much should I pay you? And time froze. Like, what? Like she would pay me
You.
to work in the gym with her and like help her to get fit.
Yeah.
Like, time stopped, and I'm gonna be honest with you. What I said $7. I swear to God, I said $7 because at the time, like $7 an hour is like that's a nice
Wage.
school job.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And so that was the beginning of my career in fitness was that moment, and I went and got certification. I switched all my coursework over in my university to biology and nutrition related stuff, and eventually started my practice working as a nutritionist and doing consulting and writing books. A couple of my books. One of them is an international bestseller, Sleep Smarter.
Sleep Smarter.
Published in 22 different countries / foreign publications.
If we have some time, I want to dive in there because like I love sleep and you're the expert on it. So if we have some time, we'll dive in.
For sure. And then Eat Smarter was a national bestseller. It was the #1 new release in the United States.
That was your first one, yeah?
That was my second book.
Okay.
That came out in the height of COVID craziness.
Okay.
And, there were printing delays, shipping delays, stocking delays, all the things. It was still the #1 new release in the United States. And I'm very proud of that. And it just spoke to, even with all the things going on in the world, people want to be healthy. They want to learn about things that can empower them.
Oh, yeah.
And, now with this new project, it's about family and helping to reestablish and reconnect all the bonds that have been broken, not just in the last couple of years, but just in recent history. And the kind of devolving disconnection that we have around food and family, right? There was a time when families ate together. Matter of fact, there was a time through our evolution, like thousands of years ago,
Yeah.
up until just about a century or two ago, that food revolved around community, right? We all have to work together to procure food, prepare, to eat together, celebrate together. Food was around celebration. And that slowly devolved to the point that today a lot of our meals are in isolation
Totally.
and in front of technology.
Totally.
And there's a place for that. It's okay. But was there something that we were benefiting from when we were eating together? And that was what launched me into this project because I found the data and it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And so, that's the new project, Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, and really excited about it.
And that drops next month.
Yeah.
Whew. We're going to dive in. Well, my man, that's an incredible story. Before we dive into some other questions I have, when you look back at that story, what's your biggest one or two takeaway like that our audience can latch on to?
I'd say number one, it's the power of taking responsibility. It's so easy to blame, to finger point, and we have absolutely our stories are valid. The things we've gone through are valid. We go through some pretty messed up situations as human beings, and my story is one of those. I grew up in poverty, but I even say that with hesitation because in the United States, poverty can still mean, you got a TV. We did get food from charities, food stamps, WIC program. My mother worked overnight at a convenience store, ended up attempted robbery. She was stabbed multiple times. It's just, again, a very volatile environment that I grew up in. A lot of violence, going outside to play. Honestly, I mean, there's a risk. It wasn't a big risk, but there's a risk that I could be shot. A drive-by shooting. There's multiple shootings at the neighborhood basketball court that we play ball at during the year. But it's like, it wasn't a regular thing, but it happened. And there's a part of your brain that's always on alert, right? And so people hear that and it's just like, oh, there is a certain way of thinking of to like, poor you. But what people don't understand is the power that comes from an environment like that as well. Because there is such a highly evolved sense of creativity to survive and to make something out of nothing. There's this very powerful spirit of connection. Like the people that you're around, you kind of like you're in war together.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a bonding. And there's just like a deep sense of like people having your back. And there's also this very powerful sense of overcoming, that was just like this is muscle built. Like we're going to make it. Now here's the thing, it's like, where is that creativity pointed? Where is that we're going to make it pointed? Is it pointed towards just getting by? Or is it pointing towards something bigger? Is the creativity pointed towards just getting a meal on the table? Or is it pointed towards transforming the health of our family, right? Because those muscles were getting built. It's just I didn't know where to direct it. And so me taking responsibility, it eliminated this possibility of like offloading or placing the responsibility on someone else to change my life for me. And unfortunately, we do that. We do it automatically. We don't realize it.
We
So
do.
that's number one. Listen, even as I'm saying this, you might think that you're taking responsibility, but it's like, I'm talking 100% responsibility. No wiggle room, no like just little outs. And you got to catch yourself because it's a daily practice as well. You're going to blame, you're going to point fingers. The faster you can point it back to yourself, the faster you can take responsibility for your part in it. Not to say that, again, you're putting yourself in, quote, bad situations, because things happen that are oftentimes unexplainable. But pointing it back to, how am I going to respond now? What am I going to do now? The thing happened. What am I going to do now? Right? So that'd be number one. Number two is just, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with that, which is it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness, right? When I transformed my health and eventually, man, it's crazy to even sit here with you and talk about this. Like I've impacted the lives of millions of people. When I'm from Ferguson, Missouri, I'm from St. Louis. Like I'm not supposed to be here. And for me, when this all changed, I lived more than once. But there's been times where I was like, I'm either gonna buy these groceries at Whole Foods and I'm like at the counter like hoping this card goes through, or I'm gonna pay my light bill. Like I'm literally taking a risk here. And so I was in that kind of situation where I didn't even have money to make it to the end of the month. There was a lot more month at the end of the money. You know what I mean? But by investing in myself and feeling better, suddenly I started to become much more adept at problem solving and procuring the money that I needed to get my life structures taken care of, right? My energy changed, my ability to, see different possibilities. Whereas again, I was kind of linear before, so that creativity was starting to get activated in a sense. And so my ability to be resourceful with the lack of, again, I didn't have any health food stores around me. There was no yoga studios. I didn't know meditation existed. I didn't know what organic food was. Like all this stuff was foreign to me. But my ability to be resourceful, and another one of those pieces I mentioned earlier, it was a friend and relationships and the power of ROR, right? We know about ROI.
What's
but
ROR?
Return on relationships. I would have never told, because I come from where I come from, I inherently developed a strong sense of self and selfishness because I had to survive. And it made me very reluctant to trust and to be in relationships outside of my tribe, outside of my family.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it was a lot of like lone wolf type energy, right? Like, and if I'm going to make it, it's all on me. It's not. Yes, again, don't mistake it from the taking responsibility part, but being successful is going to be with and through other people. And so I would not have known this man if you would have asked me even 10 years ago, like, what would be my greatest gift or success or my greatest asset? I would say something along the lines of like, maybe a financial thing to accomplish or like some kind of like career thing. No, my relationships, by far, it's not even close. It's in a different universe. Is the most valuable thing in my reality by far. And that ability to work on those things, like I come from a situation where I didn't see what healthy relationships really look like. Even my family, that we all love each other and we got each other's back and we have this kind of sense of certainty. We'll fuck each other up though. You know what I mean? It's like a lot of fighting, a lot of violence. And I didn't really see what a healthy, functional relationship looked like. I see, a lot of dysfunction. And so, but this is not just unique to me. Many people have experienced that in relationships and what they saw as examples. So wouldn't it be, if I'm telling you it's the most valuable thing, wouldn't it be valuable for you to make it a study, like to learn about relationships and healthy relationships and becoming the type of person that can manage a healthy relationship, that can actually receive the love that is given from somebody? Because I had a wall up, right? Not only that, but to be able to contribute and find a way to be of value to the lives of other people so that they want you in relationships. And so that would be my other thing would be, it's not about resources, it's about resourcefulness and flipping the switch in your mind. Like that whole, there's a will, there's a way. I'm telling you, when there's a will, there's 10,000 ways. There are so many different possibilities, but it's the ability to think externally of your circumstances. It goes back to that Einstein quote for me, we can't solve a problem at the same level that created the problem, the same level of thinking that created the problem. And that's the problem so many times, is that we start beating a problem down with our same train of thought that created the fucking problem, instead of like stepping back and seeing all the different creative ways that you can get from here to there, right? And part of that though is like feeling empowered. Being healthier makes it easier, right? And this,
yeah.
like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
hard. It's not that you can't find a way when you're not well. It's just harder,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so those would be my two things.
Oh, Shawn, man, we are just kindred spirits. I mean, from your story, your background, the inspiration, here at Fit Body, which is the franchise I oversee, we talk about first and foremost, we're not in the fitness industry. Yes, we do this, but we're in the people industry. We're in the people business. We're in the relationship business. In fact, two of our core values here at our organization is to have whatever it takes mentality. So using that resourcefulness you just talked about and taking extreme ownership, not taking ownership, taking extreme ownership. So you're speaking my language, my friend.
Powerful.
So I want to go high level here, and then we'll kind of will it down. But you are a health expert, you're a sleep expert, you're a nutritionist, a nutrition expert. What would you say, in your viewpoint, are the big problems facing the health of our country right now? And there's many, but we'd love to unpack that from your lens.
When addressing any problem, I think it's always valuable to know what you're actually dealing with, right? A lot of times we're fighting with things we don't even understand. We don't even know what the situation really is. So, yeah, we can look around and see that we have some issues as a society as far as our health, but let's get very specific. I'm just going to rattle off a few factual places that we are right now, a few statistics. So the CDC's most recent numbers from last year have denoted that today, 60% of American adults have at least one chronic disease. All right. So the majority of our citizens today have at least one chronic disease. 40% have two or more.
Ooh.
All right. So now, immediately, if you don't have a chronic disease, you're not normal. Do you understand where we're going with this?
This is wild.
Okay. So that's number one. Within that context, about 60% of American adults have some degree of heart disease. We've got about 130 million Americans that have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. We've got about 115 million Americans that have regular sleep issues and sleep dysfunction. And we've got, right now, this is crazy, I'm about to say this, when the new numbers come out, which they haven't been published yet, it's going to be even scarier because they haven't been published post-COVID yet. But prior to the pandemic and pandemic-related shutdowns and changes, we had about a 42% obesity rate in our society. 42%.
42.
And it was on track by 2030 to be at 50%. Okay? Not to mention, we're talking about clinical obesity, all right? we're not talking about the overweight component as well. Because if we bring those together, we're looking at it's knocking on the door of about 80% of American citizens are either overweight or obese. And because of the launching pad for even more disease and dysfunction over all these shutdowns and changes and something called recidivism, basically gaining weight, especially for kids. Like, matter of fact, let me just share this with you with kids, because the
Please,
CDC
yeah.
did publish this. And this was a study looking at kids during the pandemic, and they found that moderately obese children, their annual rate of weight gain doubled over the course of the initial year of pandemic shutdowns. Now, again, that might be like, oh, that's a temporary thing, but recidivism is like once we reach a state, it's kind of like a thermostat. It's like getting your body at that set point where it's more difficult. And anybody that struggled with their weight as a kid knows how difficult it is to change when you're an adult. Even as adults, once you
Yeah.
hit a certain, like you put on weight, it becomes harder and harder to change that set point. And so, we're going to hit that number of 50% before we get to 2030,
Oh, yeah.
which is just around the corner.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's like 6 years away. And so these are just some. I can go on and on. We could just do the whole episode on the fucked up statistics.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We have power to change this.
Oh,
We
yes.
absolutely do.
Amen.
But we have to understand that we also have a 4.2 trillion, like we can't even fathom how much money that is. Healthcare system. So that's how much money is invested into our healthcare system annually at this point. We are the sickest society in the history of humanity. All right. Chronic disease, specifically. All right. We're talking about largely socially, societally, structurally, culturally induced chronic diseases. We're not talking about infectious disease, which is funny that that's even gone up. Right? We don't really think, like, we thought we had that figured out, but no, it's not the case. And so, with this being said, this is a situation that we're dealing with. With that healthcare model that we have, it's profiting off of sickness. And there are, again, trillions of dollars. Our healthcare system and the amount that's invested, like, this is knocking on the door of about 20% of our gross domestic product. Like, it's a big part of our economy. If you want to bet on something, a safe bet in our society today, bet on sickness. That's how fucked up it is. All right. Now, with that said, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. What are the solutions here?
So, knowing that this is the state that we're in, and I started it off, I was pointing to where we're going to go, which is if you're healthy today, you're not normal, you're abnormal. How do we change so that health is normalized? And what it has to do with is culture. For years, and I know you've done this, I've done this, we point people towards behavior change because it's powerful. Changing a behavior, changing a habit can change somebody's life.
Totally.
Now, the other side of that, unfortunately, is that pointing someone towards a habit change in an environment that is reaffirming a poor habit is almost like using a drug to treat a symptom, right? It can mask a symptom, but if you're not addressing the root cause, the behavior can come roaring back, or the symptom can come roaring back, or manifest in a different way, right? And so at its core, and really what this new project is about, is because I finally did something that, and again, the data was crazy. I couldn't believe that nobody was talking about this. Social science and how our relationships, how our environment, how our culture is the key controller of our choices. Because as we sit here, we think that we're making the choice on what we're eating, right? And now we do have more options. You and I, we're aware of all the different options. But just for example, a culture in Maui, right? They eat certain things because it's a part of the culture.
Right.
A culture in Nairobi, they eat certain things because it's a part of the culture. A culture in Hong Kong, they eat certain things. A culture in London, they eat certain things historically because that's what's in the environment. We eat, we make choices based off of our culture. Our culture is like an invisible guidance system. It's like an invisible hand that's directing us towards choices and blinding us to other choices. All right. And to give an example of that, if we have a hunter-gatherer tribe, which we evolved from, but there are still a couple left on Earth today.
Yeah.
But because of their culture, they are blocked from the awareness that Krispy Kremes are a thing, right? That they can just go to 7-Eleven and throw a spear through a hot dog. You know what I mean? Rather than, right? So it's like their culture blocks them from the awareness that that's a thing. Now, not to say that, modern civilization folks are not dropping in and giving some T-shirts and some Twinkies and shit like that. I'm not saying don't make this a black and white thing, but truly a hunter-gatherer growing, living in their environment, they are blocked from the awareness that ultra-processed foods are something that humans eat. Okay? And in their culture, it's imbued into the culture that if you don't move, you die. Movement is required in order to procure your food, right? So movement is tied to life or death. In our culture, movement is optional as fuck.
Yeah.
Right? Especially today.
At best, man. Holy smokes.
And it's again, it's like allowing for a place where, like, yeah, this is great. We've got technology, we've got DoorDash, we've got, all these innovations, but a lot of our innovations as humans in recent history have taken away activity. They've reduced over and over and over again our need for movement. And so what happens is, if we're not supplementing or fortifying that somewhere else, this is where the whole fitness movement came from, is because we're doing so much less just to survive. And so we try to simulate it here, doing this other thing. This is where we start to get into this strange paradox that we're experiencing today, which is we are the most advanced society. I know some people like arguably, but to to grace this planet.
Yeah.
And at the same time, ironically, we're the sickest society at the same time.
Mind blows.
It's a paradox.
Yeah.
And some people will be like, well, and this is what I believed. Well, we're living longer now, right? I've got some news for you. Just in about the last 20 years, that has reversed.
Really?
Previously, every generation was outliving their predecessors.
Totally.
We're the first generation that's not going to outlive our predecessors. This advance in our lifespan has now reversed and it's going backwards. All right, and a lot of people aren't aware of that yet. And also, you got to take into consideration when things were advancing, the main thing that was taking us out was infectious disease and issues in childbirth, which was pushing down that average lifespan, by the way.
Yeah.
And so things more so related to infectious diseases. Today, the main thing's killing us. The number one killer today is heart disease, by far. Heart disease, all manner of cancers. And just one of them, by the way, endometrial cancer. There's a 7 times higher incidence. 7, not 2 times, not 3, 7 times higher incidence of someone developing endometrial cancer if they're obese.
I'm not familiar. What is that?
This cancer of the uterus, right? And so, again, if we start looking at what are the conditions that are creating these epidemics, multiple epidemics of chronic diseases, diabetes has just skyrocketed in recent years. There's a paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of our most prestigious journals. And the title of the paper was effectively 200 Years of Diabetes. And they looked back over, the last couple of 100 years and looking at the diabetes prevalence. And only in the last 40 years, it's just in the last 40 years, diabetes has almost quadrupled in our society. All right, type 2 diabetes, we're talking about
wild,
specifically.
Shawn, that is wild.
And so let's just hit right now one portion of the solution and we can go deeper. Understanding that your culture is controlling your choices. Your culture is controlling your awareness. Your culture is determining largely your health outcomes as a result. This is why, again, being in a certain society where I come from, every single one of my family members had at least one chronic disease. Everyone. Including myself, my brother, and my sister. My little brother, he's hospitalized with asthma multiple times a year.
Really?
Terrible asthma. My sister, terrible eczema. Myself, fucking arthritis as a kid. Like my bones and my spine are breaking down. Not to mention asthma, hospitalized, had my inhalers as well. My mother, obesity, diabetes, eventually cancer. My stepfather, just again, on and on. Losing so many family members, right? It's just normalized in my environment. But guess what? I broke out of that. I broke that pattern. And how I did it was I changed the culture. I made it so that healthy options were easily accessible, because when I made the decision to get well, they were not easily accessible. But I didn't let that story stop me. I started making it easier to access things that fortify my health. And that had to do with the people that I was around. Funny enough, when I started to feel better, I started to change my relationships. And it wasn't conscious. It's just like, this is a mismatch energetically, like, you know.
Like
And so,
frequency, vibration, right?
and that's a real thing. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
oh, yeah.
you don't even get me started. You know, like for years I've been contributing to a place called Heart Math Institute. And so we can read, fields that are broadcast from the human heart, the brain. And we know this, like even the electrical output of the human heart. We see that on heart monitor, you see it on the
EKG.
movie, right?
Yeah.
And but there's an energy field that's emitted from the human heart. It's called a tube torus, and it's multiple feet from your body. And these fields, literally, because we're kind of, I'm not gonna say we're ignorant, but the way that we're designed as a human, we see a certain spectrum of light. Other animals see different spectrums of light, right? And so because we see a certain way, we don't understand that there's a lot more to this story, And now we have these new fields emerging. Well, recently, really becoming popularized, of like quantum mechanics and things of the like. But there's so much about our reality that we don't understand, but we act like we know. That's the problem. And so so even that energy exchange, and I'll just share a study real quick. There were some researchers at Yale who put two people. I mean, they were strangers, but they allowed them to create rapport. Maybe like 5-10 minutes of small talk, and they had them strapped to brain monitors so they could see their brain waves and their frequencies. And they found that even within 10 minutes, their brains start to sync up, the way that their brain frequencies and patterns of brain waves, right? So shifting, beta and delta and all this stuff. Basically, their brains start to match, all right? And this is what we do, but it's unseen. We sync up with other people. We have to do that out of survival. We see that in the animal kingdom. Like, how the fuck do those birds know how to fly like that?
Yeah.
Like in this sequence,
Yeah.
It's not like, Charlie, you take the lead. They just know how to
Just go.
sync up.
Yeah.
Bees, and like the list goes on and on. We do that too. And so the people around me also moving from, okay, I've got this one kind of high leverage thing. Like, you always can find a high leverage spot, right? It's like Archimedes, right? Having that lever, right? And so for me, it was the university gym. That was my highest leverage, and I used the shit out of it, right? Because again, in my environment, it was just a 15-minute drive to get to the university, by the way. But in my environment, there were no gyms. There's a safety concern with running in the neighborhood, But this university gym, I'm about to leverage this. I didn't know that I was doing it though, but I was leaning into, this is an environment that can fortify the results that I'm looking for, right? And also the food complex. So suddenly, ironically, all these years, there's right outside of Ferguson. Well, there's a good part of Ferguson, right? It's like that with a lot of neighborhoods,
Just like
right?
anywhere, yeah.
But there's a farmer's market that had been going on forever, for years and years and years. I just wasn't in tune to it. I didn't know that it existed. But now that I'm focused on this, now the farmer's market is just like 5 minutes from my house. And now, not only am I going to the farmer's market every week, saving money, meeting the farmers, right? The people actually growing my food, I'm getting like that much closer to my food. I'm taking my family with me. And my family, even now, like, they know it's a deep memory for them of like us going to these farmers markets, because it was a new adventure for all of us. And get the kids, like, they might make little stuff there, like little treats or whatever. And we're getting these foods, and they're talking to the farmers, and it's just like it was a family culture shift by us doing these things together, right? And so the mission now for everybody is to understand that you have agency, coupled with, and by the way, I'm just going to make this caveat. A lot of our struggle, and you know this too, is like trying to get other people to change. And the truth is, we can't change anybody. It's always an internal job. It's a choice within the person. We can force people to do things. Even with our kids, we could force them to do things. But once we are able to give them a blueprint internally, right? A culture that they imbibe. And by the way, just to define culture, this is the attitudes, beliefs, values, and behaviors held by a certain group of people passed on from one generation to the next. That's what a culture is. All right. So we are inherently creating a culture for our children. A lot of times we're just doing the shit that we were taught about culture, but we can intelligently, consciously choose the culture we're creating in our own household so that our children have the internal blueprint or the internal culture. Today, I went outside to work out with my wife. And I went outside, there was a random folding chair sitting in my driveway. And I'm just like, what the fuck? I thought it was my older son, which he's a trainer. All right. And I'm just like, oh, he's out here he's probably shooting a video or something.
He's probably in his early 20s now.
He's 22. And when I started training with my wife, and here comes my older son and my youngest son, 22 and 11, walking down the street. They were training together. I didn't tell them to do that. It's just baked into our culture. All right. And it's just like, man, I was overflowing with so much joy in that moment. Like, I'm out here with my wife, like, this is amazing. This is real, and everybody is, because the trick with the two of them, by the way, because you have different personalities in the family, right? Is leveraging, finding the love and the value that each person would have for the thing, that connective tissue, right? So, caveat, we can't force people to change, but what we can do is take more control of our own culture within our household. And that's what the mission is. Because rather than me because that was my story before, my kids are going to be out here in this world that is against them in a sense, as far as their health. It's just feeding them constantly all these disempowering messages and unhealthy things.
Culture.
Yeah. That's the culture that we're existing in.
Yeah.
But we can create a microculture. And now the coolest thing, and that I realized when I went on a trip recently, we left stateside, I realized something so remarkable, all in the midst of this new project, the Smarter Family Cookbook. When we go to another culture, we take our culture with us. We take our culture with us. So even when I went to this place, other people, other families, other people who make decisions were coming up to us and asking about our family and what we're doing. To act the way that we act, to look the way that we do, to exude the energy that we have. You take your culture with you. And so that's how we change our society. That's how we change our community. You start with you. You start with the culture in your household. And that's what this new project is all about, the blueprint on how to do that. And from there, you become the model. You become an example. When people see you, they see what's possible. That's the one thing that I didn't have that would have made everything exponentially easier. But I had to create it myself. And eventually I find out all over the world, there's these other people that are experiencing the same thing, having these revelations that I'm having. My really good friend Bedros, man, I give thanks for Bedros all the time.
Dude, he's such a great dude, man.
And just like being able to align and to unify, it's just like an attractor. We just became like magnets for other people in our guild, and it's just like, it's so exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive, but at the same time, we need to know what to do. We need to know actually how do we go about shifting the culture in my household. But culture is the key. Changing the culture, taking control of your own environment, controlling the controllables.
Inspired, my friend. One of the things you just shared, it kind of cued my next question, was model. And I want to dive into a little bit more of your content. And say someone from our audience is watching or listening to this and they're inspired. They're like, holy smokes, I want to dive in more, not only for myself, my family, I can help shape, impact my community as well. Where does the average layperson go to learn more about health, nutrition, how to change their culture? And I'm going to give you a shameless plug here, speaking of the Model Health Show, which is #1 health and fitness show on iTunes. Absolutely game-changing. I've been following it for the last few years here. So I want to tee that up and just, give you the space to be able to provide a little bit of the content that you teach on that show. But then also, aside from that, what are there other areas that you look for to, gather more education, more expertise, so that way our audience can dive into this and be the change agents, be the culture change agent for themselves and their families?
Oh, man, thank you so much for that. We just crossed the 10-year anniversary of the show as well. And it's so crazy. Like this past year has been a lot of milestones, and it just kind of happened. Like I've been so busy doing the thing that I didn't realize. Like 20 years I've been doing this. 10 years of the show, and the great thing about the show has been the structure or the culture that I've created that forces me to get better. Because every single week I know that I'm going to be filming, I'm going to be in that studio, and there's something out in front of me that makes me grow. Like I've got to rise to the occasion, no matter what's going on in my life, to be able to support and add value and empower other people, right? So I'm very grateful for that. And, within that, I've strived even, I'm not trying to grab the name masterclass here, but, even, about 10 years ago, I was using that framework or that term when talking about metabolism and fat loss. Like, here's a masterclass on the process. How does it actually work? That's what we talk about. We deconstruct it. But also in terms that everybody can understand. I use a lot of analogies, so even, the process of fat loss, we can make it like going to the movies or going to the theater, So for example, the ushers that are putting the energy into its seat, right? Energy in the name, of fat in this context, right? There's an usher, certain enzymes, key enzymes that are lipoprotein lipase is one of them that can put fat into the seat, unlock and open the door, and then hormone sensitive lipase can, direct them out of the theater. And then there's their kind of bigger bosses or managers, insulin, glucagon, but all of them, their mother is Miss Pancreas. She's a loving mother. She's got her kids with different personalities, glucagon, insulin. Like we can just break it down so that everybody understands.
But that's how people learn, and that's people can grasp, like really, really challenging concepts and apply them in their lives.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
Man.
And that's what I would see. That's really the initiation of the show was I was doing this stuff in my office. Like people are coming in one after the other. Many people who had the same experience as me with our system of healthcare being told like this is incurable. You're going to deal with this for the rest of your life. I'm sorry, you can't get better. And so seeing people day in and day out, and basically, somebody's coming in and they've got their blood sugar is running at 200, just like dangerous levels of blood sugar, and metformin isn't cutting it, and they're about to be put on insulin. And for the first time, so first of all, I take them over, maybe it's a whiteboard, whatever, but we go through and I deconstruct, I reverse engineer, like how does diabetes work? Like how did this condition happen? And taking them, like I just mentioned, Miss Pancreas, right? Like this is where these cells, insulin is being produced here in your beta cells, right? And I'm just like, I'm walking them through this process and I can see the light like turn on. Like you could see it in a person where it's just like, oh my God, like that's happening in me. Like nobody's ever told me this. I just got this diagnosis and I got this label and that became my identity, right? And so helping people to basically have agency, to deconstruct that labeling or that identity milieu that happens, and also allowing them to understand how the condition is created and how to remove the cause of the condition so that you no longer have it. And so at some point though, and people know this, if you work with people, it can take a lot. It's because you want people to win, and it's so very energy intensive. And so eventually I was like, I need to record this shit. Like I need to write this down. That's why I wrote Sleep Smarter, the first iteration of that. And I need to make this available to other people because I got it because a lot of the people that I was seeing, yes, I get referrals from physicians in my network and things like that, but a lot of it was just like people sharing their experience with family members or friends, right? And I knew that if somebody didn't tell them about me in my office here in Clayton, Missouri, they're never going to find out. And so I felt like I'm being selfish if I don't find a way to get this out to more people. And I did one of the early TED Talks. It was in Las Vegas. It was TEDx Sin City. I think it was like maybe 2010 maybe. And it was at that event. And this is why all this stuff is happening, because my outlet from my clinical practice was, okay, I'm going to start teaching classes. And that led to being able to start speaking, right? And so that's how I got invited to the TED event.
Talk.
And it was at that event that this couple came up after my talk that I met previously, but you know how you meet people, it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
But they came up to me, it was like, oh my God, like we have this huge wellness site, and they had like, I don't know, 1 million unique visitors a week or something. Whatever the number was, it blew my mind because I had my little website and I had like 5 people coming to my site. And I was just like, I just want to reach people and help.
Yeah.
And so they was like, we just started this podcast and we'd love, for you to be the resident nutritionist or resident expert on the podcast. And I was just like, that would be amazing. Let's do it. But in the back of my mind, this is a true story. I was like, what the fuck is a podcast? I didn't even know what it was. And I'm just like saying yes to something because I just want to help people.
Sure.
And also the people that when we had been introduced before, he's still to this day one of my really great friends. He might have been on the show or maybe a show with Baders back in the day, Jim Quick, accelerated learning expert.
Oh, yeah.
He had introduced me to this couple. And I invited Jim out to that event. And, long story short, just starting that process, I was the face of this other brand for another person's, entity and these great couple. But eventually I knew that I needed to be, because through that lens, I was also operating largely from academia, like, how I am with the research and the studies and all this different stuff.
Super important.
But
there's another element to play,
which is me,
Yeah.
my personality,
Yeah.
my story,
Yep.
being completely authentic,
Totally.
which is a superpower, which is like crazy enough. We're scared to be our true, like authentic selves, but we don't realize that it's creating like this background stressor because with me, I'm free. Nobody has to find out. No one is ever going to find out that I'm not this person. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it freed me so much. So that's when I started the Model Health Show. And certain little things happened to make it possible to, by the way, I put in all these reps building this other show for my friends. So I came out of the gate, episode 1, we have thousands of people going back and listening to those early episodes every week, which is amazing. But I'm confident in it because the data's there. The good times are there, the empowerment's there. I was myself. I was in my bag. Now it's just like 100x because I've been doing this for so long. And so that was really the initiation of creating the show, building the platform, and within that, obviously we address all manner of conditions. I teach master classes myself, and then I'll bring on the very best people in their respective field. I'm talking about the top. You want to talk about, for example, so many things lead into your health. It's not just the food that you eat. It's not just exercise and sleep. All those things are obviously valuable, but your relationships, your finances, your financial fitness deeply impacts your health.
Dude, amen.
Right? And so, when it comes to something like relationships, I have the goats on, like John Gray, men are from Mars, women are from Venus type, to, modern day folks like Jay Shetty, all these, really good friends. And so I'll present that. And again, in addition to whatever subject matter, whether it's, cancer, whether it is type 2 diabetes, whether it's fibroid tumors, whether it's, general weight loss and fat loss, we have master classes. So it's like these archives where you can literally push play and you'll get an education on that subject that is superior to what you'll learn in a university setting. And I know this because a lot of the experts who might teach the subject matter, they're university professors or, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and the same thing holds true for me. Going to a conventional university, it's just like, why wasn't I taught this stuff? Because what I use in my practice, when I was doing that work and also just being able to teach, honestly, man, what I learned in my university that I paid all that money for is it's less than 1% of the knowledge base that I use today. It was a great experience for other reasons, but today we're at a totally different level. And what this allows us to do with the internet, with podcasts, with social media, I hope people understand this. Like, you can learn from the very best people in the world right now. Or you could listen to, I don't know, little whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you could spend your time, which is cool. You could watch Housewives of whatever, again, this is not to vilify that, but It's just where are you investing your time? You could.
Investing your time.
That's the key.
Investing your time.
Yeah, that's the key.
My man, Sean. All right, my friend. Well, the last part of the conversation, I want to kind of tee up the new book launch. And you've talked a little bit about in the conversation, the concept, but Eat Smarter, the cookbook, just got released. So can you unpack that for us? Well, actually, it hasn't been released yet. It is releasing next month. But can you unpack that and just give us some high level what our audience can expect to take away and some value there?
Absolutely. So earlier we mentioned how we evolved with community around food and how that is essentially becoming on the endangered species list, eating together with friends and family. According to researchers at Harvard, only about 30% of American families eat together on a regular basis. And we're devolving. We're moving away from a thing that has this protective capacity that, again, I was shocked to find. I'll just share a couple of these statistics with you.
Please.
So a different set of researchers at Harvard University was tracking family eating behavior for years. When I found this research, which I've got several colleagues at Harvard, I was shocked. I'm like, why isn't this everywhere, talked about all the time? And what these researchers uncovered was that families that ate together on a regular basis had far less chronic diseases. In particular, they found that they had a much higher intake of essential nutrients that help, again, the immune system, that help the body to reduce the risk of chronic diseases, and significantly less intake of processed foods, ultra processed foods, chips and sodas and things like that. Not to vilify those things, but it's a smaller part of the overall intake. Now you couple that with a really fascinating study that was done looking at minority children. And what they found was that eating together with their family four meals a week dramatically decreased their, again, incidence of risk for chronic disease and infectious disease as well, by the way. Those can go hand in hand. But what they found was, again, and I'm just going to give the specific numbers here, they found that the children who were eating with their families 4 times a week, they ate 5 servings of fruits and vegetables almost every day, 5 days out of the week. All right. And when the television was rarely on or not on at all, even lower intake of processed foods and soda. All right. That was already diminished regardless of the TV, but when it's not on,
Much less.
much less.
Yeah.
Couple that with, there's 2 studies combined published in the Journal of Pediatrics and the Journal of the American Medical Association. And this is the homework for everybody. All right. This is the one right here. So what the researchers found was that eating together, this is specifically the benefits for children. This is huge for our kids. Children who ate together with their families just 3 times a week, and this can be any meal, by the way, 3 times a week, had significantly lower incidence of obesity, lower incidence of disordered eating, and lower risk of overall chronic diseases and infections.
What?
Just eating with your family 3 times a week.
Holy smokes.
Okay. And now, what about us as adults? I shared another study in the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook looking at employees of IBM. And basically what they found was that there was this dramatic protection against abnormal stress for parents if they were able to get home and eat dinner with their families. And the more that work was inching into their ability to eat dinner with their families, the more their unhappiness at work took over and abnormal amounts of stress. And why does this matter? Well, another study that was published in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, the researchers did a meta-analysis and they found that upwards of 80% of physician visits today are for stress-related diseases.
80%.
Upwards of 80%. See, it was 60 to 80%.
Yeah.
And so stress is a huge component because your thoughts create chemistry in your body. It's a very powerful pharmacy and altering your system, whether it's hormones, neurotransmitters, cell function, the function of your mitochondria can shift instantaneously based on your perception of stress. All right, it's power. That's a whole other conversation for another day, but it's intertwined into the book. So, with that said, 3 meals a week. This could be family dinner on Tuesday and Thursday and brunch on Sunday. Right? And so, for me, I'm a why person. I want to know why. Why? How does that work? And so, one of the obvious reasons it works is that by you having that planned, and by the way, you need to schedule it. All right. We got stuff on our schedule that matters far less than our family. for us in our busy lives, a lot of times if you don't schedule it, it's not real. It's fleeting. It's a maybe. Schedule it. When you do that, and you know that family dinner is on Tuesday, it immediately invokes the brain, even your subconscious, to plan, right? What are we gonna eat? Like it creates more of a spirit of planning and purpose instantaneously because we know that the thing is in front of us. Use that to your advantage. Schedule it. And that's part of like, so what are we eating? Even if it's a shared meal, like a DoorDash, or you pick up something, once it becomes ingrained in your culture, and it is a day where everything just kind of goes off the rails, and you got to order something or pick something up, we still sit down and eat together, right? So again, it's creating a new family culture of eating meals together more frequently. It's protective for your children. Another reason why is that there is like some powerful psychology that's in the midst at a dinner table, okay? A dinner table is a unifier, all right? Now, of course, there could be drama at the dinner table. I don't know if anybody's ever seen Yellowstone, but Beth is a problem at the dinner table, okay? She's never going to finish a meal. So some families might have characters like that. But what I'm pointing you to, and this is also, I address this in the book, being a parent, and this is the thing, because we point fingers, all those years when I was doing clinical work, the number one reason that people gave, men and women coming in to see me for not achieving the goals that they wanted to achieve was their family. Yeah, so you got this thing is like, well, it's just like my kids won't, my husband won't, my mom won't. You don't understand, right? And there's pointing fingers at their family. They're the big obstacles. And the reality is this: you know your family better than anyone. But because we just want them to do the shit we want them to do, we don't have to tell them, or we don't want to have to cater things to them, unless it's their birthday or some shit like that. But in reality, you absolutely know what inspires your children to take action and what makes them retract. You know what excites them and you know what de-excites them. Use that to your advantage. Use that as an intentional, loving parent and start to put in place strategies to get through to your children and the people that are around you, your loved ones. My wife, I'm Pinocchio to her. Like she knows how if she wants to. Sometimes she doesn't want to.
Yep.
And that's when we'll have conflicts. But she knows what will get me to be very influenced. You know what I'm saying? And I know the same thing for her.
Sure.
And sometimes we just don't feel like we have the emotional reserve to go out of our way. This goes back to even the love languages, right? The 5 love languages. And by the way, Gary Chapman's work is in the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, because those different love languages, basically we give and receive love differently, but all of us have all of them, right? So maybe, for example, with myself and my wife, maybe my love language is words of affirmation, right? That really makes me feel like she loves me, right? For her, it could be acts of service.
Acts of service.
Right?
Yep.
And so but if I'm just telling her how amazing she is and beautiful, I wrote her this beautiful poetry, it's like, oh, that's cool.
Falling deaf ears, bud.
Right?
Yeah.
But then it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
she doesn't see me or love me but the reality is, with those 5 love languages, food fits into all those things perfectly. All right. So for example, with acts of service, oh my goodness, when my wife had our youngest son and my mother-in-law brought over food, she's from Kenya, so she made traditional Kenyan food, chapati and dangu and chele, sukuma wiki, right? So all these things I didn't know what was, and basically I just said rice and beans and greens and some chapati and some ground beef or whatever the case might be, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
she brought over food. Is that act of service for her? She's not coming over telling her daughter she loves her. That hasn't been in her family history. Like, me doing this for you, I love the shit out
I
of you.
love you. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And it's just like, man, it fills my mother-in-law up so much to cook for us and to provide that service. And for her, words of affirmation, right? So speaking that back to her just fills that pot, fills it up. And, physical touch. Nothing touches us closer than the food that we eat. It's literally we're taking something from the environment, putting it in your body,
Yeah.
and it becomes a part of you.
Totally.
That's so powerful.
Totally.
You know? And I can go on and on with those connections, but it's interwoven in the book because I knew this intimately and I saw it in clinical practice, but also just in working with all of these experts in their respective fields. It's just like there's something really special about food because it changes you from the inside out because food isn't just food, it's information. Right? So it's providing certain nutritional inputs that's changing your chemistry. Like it can't help but do that, right? So you're consuming things that, for example, the microbiome is having a huge moment right now and understanding how important the health of our microbiome is and all the respective genes that these bacteria are carrying. If we go gene for gene, human beings, if we go gene for gene with all the bacteria that we're carrying, 99% of our genes are bacterial genes. They're not, quote, human genes. All right. So how much is that impacting our health? We know today that there's this huge interaction with our bacterial genes, their expression, and our gene expression. Mm-hmm. Right. And so putting all this together, like, what are the choices? What foods are we putting in that's interacting with our microbiome? And we have the opportunity to become more cognizant of what we're feeding our microbiome and the health outcomes that come from that. And, there's, even within that context with the microbiome, and this is really cool, your microbiome and this incredible bacteria cascade, they all want to have certain conditions in order to give you optimal health, right? So there's another field parallel to that, and I didn't always get to talk about this. I'm just to say it really quickly, and it's something I've been studying the last couple of years, which is circadian medicine, right? And so how our interaction with the environment, like I talked about to start all this out, our culture, how often are we actually interacting with our environment? Because we're picking up our cues from the 24-hour solar day. So we're a part of the solar system. News flash. I know it's weird, like we're just here on this planet, but we're synced up. All of our cells are we can get out of sync, but all of our cells are constantly trying to sync up with the 24-hour solar day because that's determining when certain hormones are getting produced, certain neurotransmitters, what's happening with our microbiome. There's actually a changing of the guard even with certain bacteria cascades based on time of day it is. And you could throw that off, jumping a bunch of time zones and not getting your body kind of synced up with the new place that you're at. Because your body, we've never been able to just jump from this place to another place so quickly in human evolution until like the last couple of decades.
Yeah, 50 years.
Right? So what are those impacts? And now we know, like we have, science has evolved enough to know, but we also know how to get yourself back in alignment faster, right? And so through food and understanding that, again, food isn't just food, it's information. When you eat that food, it's coming along with certain qualities like, and this brings it full circle, like why did I bring up the microbiome? When you eat a food, you're eating that food's microbiome. When you're eating a blueberry, it has its own microbiome.
Oh, sure.
When you eat an avocado, it has its own microbiome. Lucky Charms doesn't have a fucking microbiome. All right? That leprechaun.
Take that to the bank.
The leprechaun is lying to you. All right? It does not have a microbiome. It might have some microbes, all right? But it's very different. And this is what also the message pushing forward in the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook is, according to the British Medical Journal, this is one of our most prestigious medical journals, the average American adult is eating 60% of their diet is now ultra-processed foods, right? That's been making some headway recently with a lot of people realizing this.
Yeah.
But what they don't know, and Eat Smarter Family Cookbook is the first book published that has this new data, because when I wrote the book, it had just been published. This was published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. They looked at the food intake of our children aged 2 to 19, children and adolescents, tracked it for 20 years. In 1999, the average American child was eating 61% of their diet was ultra-processed foods. Fast forward to 2018.
I'm scared.
67% of our children, our average child's diet here in the United States is ultra-processed foods. What are we doing to our kids? And just so everybody's clear, ultra processed food is, again, Lucky Charms.
Lucky Charms, a leprechaun, baby.
Right? So it was corn at some point, some of the ingredients, but it's so denatured. The additives, the preservatives, the processing, the high heat, taking the corn also, not just the substrate for building a cereal complex, but the sugar, right? The corn syrup. It's so denatured that if you presented Lucky Charms to that hunter-gatherer tribe, they have no clue, no idea whatsoever. They couldn't possibly know where it came from. Most people, no, we don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, we don't
right?
even know.
And so, versus humans have been processing food for thousands of years. Like, this is what has helped us to develop this highly evolved brain that we have. And because we could take something like tomatoes and, process it, minimally processing, adding some spices, some other different foods, and making something like a pasta sauce. Or taking olives and pressing them. And olives, by the way, this food is so historical. It's in many different like ancient texts, But we could take that olive, cold press it, stone press, and we have olive oil, right? That's minimally processed. And that olive oil, and I shared this study in the book as well, because I talk about the cultural contagions that we need to protect our children from, that protect ourselves from as well. One of them being these abhorrent amounts of, quote, vegetable oils, canola oil and the like, that I started using back when I was trying to get myself healthy because it said fucking vegetable. But it's not broccoli oil or asparagus oil. These are highly processed. If you see how canola oil is made, I promise you'll never consume it again. It has to be, it's treated with high heat processing, all these different bleaching agents, deodorizers, and why is it deodorized? Because it smells terrible, by the way. And it's so denatured. The fat complex, the polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs, they're so damaged that you're just drinking pure reactive oxygen species, just pure oxidation, pure aging. All right? And I'm not just saying this because I provide the data, study after study. There's even a study in the book that's published in the journal Inhalation Toxicology that found that just smelling vegetable oil while cooking can damage your DNA. Real talk. Again, people don't know this stuff, but once they become aware, again, we can create a shift in our culture. So protecting against cultural contagions like that stuff, extra virgin olive oil, on the other hand, researchers at Auburn University found that this is one of the few foods ever discovered that can repair the blood-brain barrier and reduce inflammation in the brain. And why would I want to reduce inflammation in my brain? Is that a problem? Well, researchers at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine found that as we're getting fatter, when we're accumulating more body fat, it's creating more inflammation in our brains. And they found that inflammation in our brain creates more body fat and insulin resistance. So it becomes this vicious circle.
So cycle, yeah.
In steps olive oil that can actually do something about it, right? So of course we want to remove the cause, but sometimes you get caught in that vicious circle. What are some things that I can add into the mix, right? So there's over 40 specific foods that I identify and provide a wealth of different studies, but in a fun way. And then we talk about, let's cook with them. Let's take these amazing foods and make some delicious meals with them, right? So if I talk about the benefits of a long utilized food like sweet potatoes, let's make pancakes with them. All right. So it's just like tuning into the joy of eating, the joy of food experiences, making great, wholesome recipes, having fun together, creating a new kitchen culture, and just, again, creating a new culture of health overall.
Dude, man, freaking love it. In this short period of time, I mean, just a couple takeaways, Shawn, from you. I'm going to change the way I eat with my wife, my family, like turning off the TV, setting on my calendar. I do everything by my calendar, but you're right. Like even for me, it's like the last thing that I plan. So I got a ton of value from that, and I know our audience did too. So I appreciate that. Where can they find more about your book?
EatSmarterCookbook.com. Go to EatSmarterCookbook.com. While it's in pre-order, which you need to grab your copy now, you're going to get a free ticket to the Family Health and Fitness Summit. It's a virtual summit. And you're going to hear from some of the leaders in the world in fitness and health, nutrition, who have kids, who are sharing their strategies. Like One of them is Layla Ali, for example, really good friend of mine, undefeated, undisputed boxing champion, yes. And also, but what people don't know a lot of times, which is crazy that a lot of people don't know this, she also won the cooking show Chopped twice. So she, oh my goodness, she's one of the best cooks I've ever been able to eat her food. But one of her mandates, she might be the busiest. She's definitely in the top like 1% of busy people that I've ever met. She's got so many different things going on, but she makes it a mandate multiple times a week. She prepares dinner for her family. It is her love language. It's something she's deeply committed to. How on earth do you do that, Layla, with all of these things on your schedule? Like, you're going to get to learn how does she actually do that. You're going to learn from Dr. Daniel Amen, child psychiatrist, double board certified psychiatrist, but the leading expert in the world in actual brain imaging and also nutrition related to cognitive function. So, like looking at this through the lens of neuroscience, how do we support our families, our kids? How has he dealt with having kids in his household and even his marriage and having a bonus kid? Like, we're going to ask all these questions like, how do you manage the different personalities? How do you guys deal with picky eaters? So, we got Gabby Reese as well as another contributor, Dr. Will Bolsowitz. Just the list goes on and on. Like, brilliant thinkers who have kids who figured some things out. And you get to learn from them as well. So the ticket to the event is $297. You get it for free when you pre-order the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook.
Heck yeah. And my friends, I purchased a copy for all my team. So I'm excited to dig in as well, man. Nothing but love and support for you, Shawn. All right, my friend, you've been so gracious. We got a little bit more time for the bonus round, and I think I was right. We're going to have you back on to digest Sleep Smarter at some point if you're up for it, because that's a lot of awesome content too. But from our bonus round, I mean, you've talked about your passion today, but if I can get hyper-focused, what would you say, Shawn, is your passion and why? And specifically, what do you want your legacy to be?
This is it right now. Being somebody who's worked in the field of health and wellness for as long as I have, my bridge into it, what changed me personally was food. And so I made food everything, right? So that was for me the solution for everybody. I really felt it was a cause and cure, but it's so much bigger. We know that today. And that was what drove me to write Sleep Smarter. Like, I didn't plan on being this like kind of global sleep expert or subject matter expert with sleep, but that put me in a different stratosphere. But for me and my passion and what I'm pushing forward, I feel that, and this is for everybody, if you're curious about what your purpose is, it's probably something that comes natural to you, that you have a natural curiosity about, that it might not be as easily accessible to other people, or other people might not have curiosity about that thing, okay? So what comes easy to you that's difficult for other people? I think about that. For me, my greatest gift and the thing that is just so natural to me is my family. The love that we have, the connection that we have, we don't even, I don't like using these labels because it's what is, the culture that we have, that we've developed despite our circumstances, right? And to see that transitioning over to where my son is impacting the lives of so many other people now, right? It's so powerful, man. It's so freaking powerful. So for me, that's what my passion is my family. And unfortunately, so many of us, we hear these stories. We work so hard to provide for our families, and then we miss out on our families. And I'm here to tell you that it's a both and world. It's just a shift in our priorities. It's just a shift in getting clear and honest. Like, is your family really the most important thing? Fucking act like it. And so by exercising that muscle, and of course, this has not been easy, by the way, but figuring some things out along the way and being able to put that into a shareable resource now. And now what's different about this right here, it's not just me. Sleep Smarter was just me. Out here on CNN and the Dr. Oz show and Fox and all these different things and traveling all over the place. Eat Smarter, same thing. With this, it's my family. Everywhere I go, they go. They're the model. They're the representation. They're demonstrating what's possible. And so, this is truly a family mission, you know, and yeah, so that's what it is for me.
Love that, man. Who is your biggest hero, and then who's your biggest enemy?
Easy. My biggest hero is my mother-in-law. She's the person who really flipped this switch in my mind. I was working at the university gym. That's where I met my wife, you know. And I wasn't like, I was just in my bag trying to help people, the whole thing. And I just saw her coming in, you know, kind of dedicated, whatever. And she dropped her headphones one day. I picked it up. We started talking, that kind of thing. But I didn't know this until like literally maybe 3 or 4 years ago that she had her eyes on me. All right. So she was like, she told her friend, like, I want him to train me.
She dropped her headphones then, huh?
Right. And listen, it was the most awkward machine. You know, that adductor machine, you know, where the leg. Yeah. So it's just like, so I was very like, I tried to do it in a cool way, you know. But you know, meeting her, getting the package deal and having my mother-in-law and seeing the transformation that she created in her own life and how she was impacted. She's an occupational therapist, and she really leveraged because she saw that people in her field, she's got all these great therapists who want to help people, but a lot of times they're not getting well. And so she started to implement pieces of nutrition and meditation and all these other tools that, again, for me, I thought was super, super weird at first. And it wasn't until I was, like I said, just growing up in the kind of health conditions that I had. Once I didn't have like chronic asthma, I still had seasonal hay fever that would hospitalize me pretty much every year. I couldn't breathe at night.
Dang.
Right? And this was just like, we'll just say 2005. All right? And outwardly, very healthy. But I was still including some things that were causing this kind of histamine reaction, making me hypersensitive to the world around me, that I should not be allergic to the world. Sure. Right? Yeah. And so I went over to see my wife, my then girlfriend. She took me to the ER, and I got my script, my prescription, and we stopped by my mom-in-law's house, and she told me, you know, my daughter tells me that you have this hay fever, or you have these allergies and you can't breathe. I was like, yeah, you know, it's the weather, you know, this happens every year. She was like, she just looked me in my eyes. She's like, is the problem out there or is the problem in you? Bro, that like, it baked my noodle, man. Like I was just like, oh my God, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
And so that sent me down a path. And again, I'd already made so many great improvements and helped a lot of people. But that made me start to reassess the environment, my internal terrain, and looking at what is right for me right now versus other people. Because all of us are unique. And that's the future of medicine, is personalized nutrition, right? Because a certain food, even for you right now, might really be something you can thrive with, but it might be detrimental later, right? And we have to have the tools to be able to assess, like, no, this doesn't feel right now. Let me do this instead. But a lot of times we get caught in diet dogma, and it's just like a certain framework, and we stick to it even if we suffer. And that framework can be leaving out things that can transform your life. And so for me, it's my mother-in-law, definitely my greatest hero. She also taught me meditation as well, which, if all the stuff that we talked about, that's probably changed my life more than anything. My greatest enemy. I don't know if I want to open this can of worms, but I mean, right now it's you know, the pharmaceutical industry, the pharmaceutical model, and you know, the processed food industry. You know, they're both profiting from our sickness.
Totally.
And the reason I didn't want to open this up is because for me, it still isn't necessarily an enemy in the traditional sense, because over the last couple of years, I've shared a lot of the data regarding the crimes committed by drug companies. You know, for example, Pfizer was convicted of the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice. We're talking about billions. They're the first, outside of, like, if we're talking about RICO charges, you know, for racketeering and like organized crime, they're convicted of a RICO charges. All right. Organized fucking crime. And just like, but whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not to say again that they can't do good or create products that can be helpful in our society, but we need to know the system that we're dealing with that's profiting and doing unethical practices that are largely hurting so many people. And so, with that being said, if I would share some of that data, 95% of people like, just taking the data, like, I didn't know this, thank you so much, this is a huge problem, that kind of stuff. But then every now and then it'd be somebody that listens to my show that works at Pfizer. It's like, Shawn, I hate when you share this stuff. I know you're right, but it's like this is where, because they went there to help.
Sure.
They went to work at Johnson & Johnson. This happened multiple times. Like I have people who work at Johnson & Johnson that listen to the show or follow me, whatever. They're just like, Shawn, this breaks my heart. Or Monsanto or whatever it is. It's just like, I'm just sharing the data because they're good people in all of these organizations. Really good people. Matter of fact, I would venture to say the majority of the people are good people. It's just their perception, the culture that they were exposed to has them, unfortunately, working in an overall situation where the outcomes are often detrimental when they're trying to help, and the good that they are doing is often overshadowed when we're talking about real world data by the damage that they're doing, and they don't know any better, And so that would be that if I was to say my biggest enemy, but it's more like a frenemy.
I like that, man. Last few here. You are in the business of giving incredible fitness, health advice in general. What's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever seen, Shawn? Why?
The best advice that's just jumping to mind, and I'm just thinking recently, would be who's funding the study? Asking who's funding the study. And this is from my friend John Abramson, Dr. John Abramson. He works in healthcare policy at Harvard, and he's been involved in a lot of pharmaceutical litigation. Not because he wanted to or was a mission in his life. He was just brought in as an expert on a case, and it just kind of fell into it. And he got to see all the the emails and all the things that people don't see. And he has to sign an NDA and all the things, but he's seen where the bodies are buried kind of thing. And it's just like he knows that most of our university funding today, which is where most of our data is coming from, is largely funded and controlled by drug companies. Like, you're just not going to get a grant if this is taken away from our bottom line, this particular supplement or whatever, or if you're painting our primary product, right, that's generating trillions. It's $1 trillion industry. So unfortunately, we have this kind of twisted system right now. And so even when I've shared a tremendous amount of studies today, but one of the reasons that you can rely on the efficacy of what I'm talking about is I do something that a lot of people don't want to do, which is I look at the studies that disprove what I believe. It takes courage to go and proactively find something that is framed in a valid way that disproves what you believe, because the truth is usually somewhere in the middle, right? And so what I do is, after looking at a subject matter, I share what does the majority of data say, because we could probably rely on that. But even with that, it's still going to be case sensitive. It's going to be situation dependent. It's going to be person sensitive. That's the problem that we have as well, is that now it's just this global, one size fits all kind of framework when it comes to diet and when it comes to drugs, and the list goes on. And we are far from uniform. We're very unique. Each of us has a unique metabolic fingerprint, a unique microbiome fingerprint that can be dramatically different from even with identical twins. One of the largest studies done, like looking at identical twins and their microbiome changes, like we can have kids that are in the same environment, but if one of the twins, again, identical twins, has a higher ratio of bacteria class called firmicutes versus another bacteria category, they're going to gain more weight than their twin. Same environment, same diet. All right. So I can go on and on with those kind of examples, but that would be best advice recently. This is maybe, this is some years ago, but that's something I've paid more attention to, is like who's funding the study?
Yep.
What does the majority of data say? Let me also always counterbalance with something that disproves what I believe.
Good on you, man. It's sage advice. So Shawn, what would your parting piece of wisdom be? Our audience here, they're inspired. I'm inspired. I'm a fitness pro. I learned a lot right now. And I would imagine our audience did as well. And not only for themselves, but also to be changing it in their communities to affect their culture. What would you say, Shawn, from your lens, would be a parting piece of advice from this episode today?
As I said earlier, we've got to really get it through our skulls that we can't change people. We can't. Change is an inside job. We can inspire, we can create conditions, but ultimately, real sustainable change is going to come from within. It's going to come from an internal revelation. And so the very best thing that you can do is be as healthy, as fit, as resilient, as creative, as compassionate, as patient as you can possibly be. Train yourself. Work on your own mind and body so you can be an example. Because I promise you, people learn a lot more from who you are than what you say, right? So that's really the message and the another mandate here. I mentioned 3 days a week with your family meals, and friends are also included, by the way. If you're like, well, I'm not living with my family right now, friends are included as well. That piece, and also focus on you first. It's said a lot, but we don't do it. Invest in yourself every day. Invest in your body, your mind, train your mind. Especially now, you need to train that mental fitness every single day so that you can better influence, so that you can better create conditions for other people to change.
Mic drop, my dude. All right, well, I got one last question, which is my final one. And the title of this podcast is the Fitness CEO Podcast. Shawn, for you, what does it mean to be a CEO?
This all ties together in a beautiful sequence, which is, being the example, leading by example, being the model. Again, people will listen to what you do far more than what you say, right? And we're all intelligent, in some capacity. And so being able to also see the gifts in other people, right? I talked about this in relationship to parents, like your family, them. Utilize that, help to bring the best out of everybody. That's going to require, again, you working on yourself and having the patience, having the bandwidth, having the capacity, especially when stress is around, to encourage, to support the people that you care about. In the context of being a CEO, you're the CEO of your family. You're the CEO of your body, and so that's what it would be for me, just leading by example.
Look at that, my dude. All right, before we wrap today, where can our audience find you in the case they don't follow already?
Awesome. Well, where they're listening to this amazing podcast, they can find my show as well. It's called The Model Health Show. The Model Health Show. And my home online is themodelhealthshow.com. If you want to connect with me on Instagram, I'm at Shawn Model on Instagram, SHAWN Model. And that's probably, for where a lot of the hangout and content sharing is as well. And most importantly, though, go into eatsmartercookbook.com and get your copy of the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook. Be a part of this mission and movement. Get your free ticket to the Family Health and Fitness Summit. And also, we're doing a 25K health and fitness giveaway, too, so you get entered into that. So many great things there. But, again, just invest in yourself, invest in your family, and we can change this shit.
Yes, sir. Well, I do. Before we wrap today, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you, not only for you coming out here today, which is awesome. Been a long time coming, so finally excited to connect in the studio. But for your heart, dude, your knowledge, your passion, and your soul. But most importantly, and I'll never forget this about you, man. Like I said earlier, my wife's been a big fan for quite some time, and we reconnected at Bedros' house. And like Christmas party last December. And I was excited to reconnect with you and chit chat. And I was able to introduce my wife. And I just genuinely thought you'd chat with her for a few minutes. You sat and talked with her for like 45 minutes. And she went home that like the only thing she could talk about was how awesome experience and how a genuine salt of the earth of a dude that you are. And for that, if that doesn't say anything about you, I don't know what else will. So with all that, my friend, I just want to thank you again and appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, man. It's my honor. Thank you.
All right, friends, I know you got a ton of value, assuming you did. 2 things for you. Like this video and share this with someone in need. And remember, no one is coming to save you. You must save yourself, and the time is now. Thanks, and see you next episode.